education on how you as a real estate agent can not only sell short-term rentals, but also build an investment portfolio, again, of lifestyle assets. I have with me today a guest who might be the foremost expert in the country on this very topic. This is an episode you absolutely do not want to miss. The big question is this: how do those of us in the real estate industry with crazy amounts of ambition, how do we think bigger than the building of our own empires? How do we simultaneously seek success and significance, income and impact? My name is Justin Stoddard, and this is the Think Bigger Real Estate Show. All right, guys, welcome back to this episode. I am very excited about this episode for a number of reasons. Number one, this individual today, who I'm going to introduce here in just a second, is, as I mentioned, the foremost expert on this topic, potentially around the entire nation. Secondly, I have to put this out here before I introduce him, is that I was setting goals for this year. In fact, let me just introduce you, Shawn. I can't wait that long. Let's just go ahead and introduce Shawn Moore, and then I'll tell my story. So, Shawn, thanks for coming on the show today, my friend.
Justin, thanks for having me, man. I'm really excited to chat with you.
My pleasure, man. Okay, you got to hear this story. When I was setting my big vision for the upcoming year and years, I thought to myself, I know real estate investment is going to continue to become a part of my life more and more so. And I thought, what would make real estate investing really interesting? And I thought to myself, you know what I would really love is not only assets that pay me passive income, but I'd really like to take my family, now that there's 6 kiddos and they're at the age where we can go do some things. Love to have some properties in some key places that were investments that allowed us to go visit them. I literally put this out into the universe, whatever you want to call that, here over the past probably 3 months. And it was shortly after that time that you came in front of me and asked to be on the show. And I thought to myself, okay, this is manifestation at its finest. Absolutely love it. So excited to be here, not just for the benefit of helping all the real estate agents that we serve, but also selfishly, so we can start a conversation on how the Stoddard family starts to build lifestyle assets. So, Shawn, such a pleasure to have you here, my friend.
Absolutely. That's awesome. I love hearing those stories, love diving in with anybody. And I've got I was telling you before we hit record, I've kind of got a soft spot in my heart for realtors, and because I have been one and owned a brokerage for years. And so it's really, I love seeing realtors also succeed in this game as we start to build our own portfolios. And so, yeah, it's been a lot of fun, a wild ride. I've been a full-time real estate investor for 22 years and kind of had a similar thought process in my head years ago, just saying, as I bounced around different asset classes and how we stumbled upon short-term rentals, was to kind of the same questions you were asking yourself is, okay, I want to build passive income. I love real estate in general, period. Just so everybody's aware that is listening. I love real estate. I love passive income vehicles that revolve around real estate. Every vehicle has pros and cons. Short-term rentals checked a lot of boxes on the fund side as well because of that personal use aspect. And so that's what got us into it almost 16 years ago now. We've been doing this in the short-term rental game since 2006. So way before it was as popular as it is now.
Now, for those that are just listening to the podcast, you would love the fact that Shawn is sporting probably the coolest cowboy hat I've ever seen, with big longhorn sitting in the background. I know where you're at. Why don't you tell everyone else what part of the country you're in?
Yeah, I live in the mountains in Utah. I live up in northern Utah, right at the base of a snow basin ski resort. And so we love to hang out in the outdoors and the mountains. And you don't see me sporting much else besides a cowboy hat and Wranglers most days.
It's funny. I got pictures from my sister who just moved to North Ogden. I mentioned that to you.
Yeah.
Of all 4 of her little boys at Snow Basin, which, by the way, was one of the venues for the Olympics.
Yeah.
About a couple decades ago.
Yeah, 2002.
So, I mean, it's first class, and to live right at the base of that, pretty awesome, right? And that really, real estate investing is what's allowed you to do that, to pick a spot on the map, say, we love it here. We're going to have our primary home here, and then we're going to have these other assets in other places where we can travel to as well.
Yeah, it's been really fun. I've got twins. They're 11 years old now, that age and we've been traveling with them since they were 6 months old. They were on planes when they were a couple months old. And, but we've got properties all across the country, and they're homeschooled, and we're able to kind of go visit wherever we want and stay wherever we want. We live in a kind of a resort style of an area for our primary residence, but it's really fun to be able to bounce around and be able to enjoy other areas of the country as well. We have a lot of fun with it.
let's just get into that really quickly. What are some of your favorite places to go visit where you guys have an asset, if you will, lifestyle asset?
Yeah, it kind of changes, to be honest. So I usually keep a portfolio that we upgrade and change around a little bit. Right now, one of our favorite places is in North Georgia. We go up in the Blue Ridge Mountains in Georgia. My kids and wife really love that, and so different mountain environment. Where we're out, we love the Western Mountains, and so have some properties up by Jackson Hole and those areas. Had some up by Yellowstone National Park. We do own the classic beach homes in Destin, Florida, and some of those beach communities in Florida, but we're kind of drawn to more the mountains. We love the outdoors. Any national parks that we can get to, we love to do. And so our portfolio pretty much revolves around national parks and state parks that we can get outside.
What a cool situation, raising those twin boys, right?
One of each, boy and girl, actually.
Boy and a girl. Okay.
Yeah, boy and girl.
Fun. How fun. I love it. What a beautiful family experience, right? While they're young enough to really still be under your roof, to be able to go and do amazing things with them. And folks, I think that's really maybe the potential end result for those of us listening to this today, is to say, you know what, it would be amazing to have those experiences with my family. And the question always becomes, well, how do I fund that? How do I have properties in multiple places? Well, this is the funding mechanism, and this is the destination. Like, it's the journey and it's the destination all wrapped into one, which is absolutely so cool. So let's get into this. How does one, now again, we're talking about a couple different things here. Number one is, how does a real estate agent specialize in this and get really good at it to where investors like you know that in their area, they are the go-to for this, right? So let's maybe start with that topic, and then we want to talk about, from the investor side, how to get started. So when you're like entering into a new market, how do you choose a real estate agent? What does that look like? What are you looking for?
Yeah, I kind of back it up in how when I was selling real estate, I was always a full-time real estate investor. And at the time when I was doing a lot of development deals, and I was doing a lot of fix and flip deals in a certain area. So I knew what investors needed. I knew what they were looking for when it comes to the numbers, the economics of a deal. And so I got really good at understanding how to underwrite a deal like an investor would, because that's what I did forever. And then there came a time in my life where we were selling this big resort property or project, private ski and golf resort, like $25-30 million homes in Utah, in the mountains in Utah. And the owners of that resort got indicted on securities charges. And so it literally got shut down overnight. One day the Fed came in, and they came in, all these agents locked up computers, file cabinets, and it was over. And we looked at each other thinking, okay, what do we do? And we went and took that skill set of understanding an asset class and this was in 2009. And so if everybody, those agents that are listening to this, remember, in 2009 was not the funnest time to be selling real estate, unless you were selling and had some REO accounts, some bank owned, and we're working with asset managers at the banks. And we became the largest retail team in Utah by 2011, because I understood how to go work with investors, and I knew what they were looking for. Those of you that have ever worked with investors, they're real buyers, right? They want to buy properties, but they also love working with agents who are experts in the assets that they're interested in buying. Well, short-term rentals right now is a very mainstream, like very in-demand asset class, if you will. Lots of people know about them. Lots of people want to buy them, but they don't all make money. And so a lot of agents don't understand the economics of a deal. So for me as an investor, like, we have one of the largest investment groups. It is the largest in the country. We've got almost 2,000 active investors that are constantly buying properties. And we're constantly looking for the best realtor partners in different markets and different areas. Well, the way that we find the agents that we like to work with are those agents that understand the asset class that we're getting into. And you would think that a lot of people would understand the asset class, and that's not true. The economics of every single type of an investment are different, and short-term rentals are the same, right? There's a lot of different moving parts to the underwriting. If you can become really good and understand an asset class, whether it's short-term rentals or anything else. When I did this, it was fix and flip properties, but I became the largest retail team outside of any other REO agents and those big REO teams back in 2009, 10, 11 in Utah, because I understood investors. We work with investors or agents now as investors who understand this asset class, and they understand how to underwrite them. Because if somebody calls us with a good deal, there's money there's people with money that want to buy it, right? A lot of agents right now, the market's shifting around. A lot of things are different. It's not like, everything that hits the market doesn't sell. There's a lot of buyers that are, retracting a little bit because of interest rates. And so a lot of retail buyers are sitting on the sidelines. This isn't a time where investors sit on the sidelines. A lot of investors dive into markets like this. And so if you can start to really understand an asset and how to underwrite it and what an investor is looking for, and you develop relationships with those investor groups, man, you can really expand during these times of contraction for a lot of people.
So if an agent were listening to this right now and they're like, I would love to create a niche, which, by the way, riches are in the niches, right? We know that.
Absolutely.
I would love to create a niche around this, right? And let's say that they're starting from scratch. Is there somewhere they would go in order to start to learn what that underwriting process looks like? And maybe it's to some of the resources you've created and or professionals in their community, in their marketplace, that can help them to really understand what that underwriting process looks like.
Yeah, I would. Yeah, we've got a lot of resources, right? I've got a podcast. We've got a YouTube channel. We've got Vodyssey.com. You can go check it out. That's a great place to start. There's a lot of other people who have books on short-term rentals. And so there's a lot. One, you have to understand the ownership model. Now, when you get into short-term rentals, there's an arbitrage or co-hosting type of a model. Control, don't own is kind of a term that a lot of people will use. And then the ownership model. You have to understand the ownership model because of the actual underwriting. If you're trying to sell the property to somebody, it's going to be an investor who's going to own it. So I would start with some of the free resources out there, the books, the websites. There's not a lack of information out there. The hardest part right now is sifting through the information available. And so when you are finding information, make sure you're getting it from somebody that has been in the game for a little while. We're not the only game in town. We're not the only people that have ever had success in this. There's other people that do very, very well in this game. Just make sure that they've been in the game for a little bit longer than just this wild ride we've had the last 2 or 3 years is all I would say, right? And then as an agent, naturally, you're going to know the economics of a deal in your area. You're going to understand if somebody's overpaying for property, all those different things as far as values, right? But you might not understand the income potential of a property. And so there's tools like AirDNA and things like that. And there's a lot of different resources that are free that you can start to cut your teeth on to say, okay, is this even an asset that I'm interested in? If you do have some interest, obviously, all of those rabbit holes will go other places and you can find more and more information from there.
Did you say AirDNA? Was that the tool that you referenced?
Yeah, AirDNA.co is one of the main analytics tools, the data analytics tools that are available out there for people like us as investors that we'll go use. We use a lot of different data tools. I've always said I have not found one yet that is kind of a plug and play. As much as they want to say, put your address in here, we'll tell you the income potential. We have yet to find one that we feel reliable enough to write checks on those numbers. And so it's important for you to look at some of that, though. We extract data like occupancy rates, average nightly rates, the range of revenue in a market, and airdna.co is a great spot where you can start to extract some of that data and put those pieces of the puzzle together.
I love it. Great tip, Shawn. Let's talk, some of the risk. I think that's one of the things that investors want to be sure of, right? Is that they have an Airbnb property, short-term rental, and that it doesn't, zoning doesn't switch, right?
Yeah.
Unexpectedly, and all of a sudden they can't operate a business out of there and the value's dropped. What do you do when you go into a market to hedge against some of those risks that obviously you can't prevent all of them, but what advice would you give to a real estate agent who's either getting investors or themselves?
Yeah, it's a great question because one, there's two things. On the first side, we were just talking about really underwriting and understanding the numbers. With short-term rentals, you're going to have a wide revenue range in a market. And so we need to understand that revenue range. It's not like a 2-bed, 3-bath that has a long-term rental in a certain market. Your revenue range is going to be a monthly rate of, $1,500 to maybe $1,650, right? There's not a huge range in revenue that a 3-bed, 2-bath is going to get on a long-term rental in a similar area, similar property. Nightly rentals, short-term rentals are exactly the opposite. There's a huge range of revenue based on the area you're at, but more importantly, really the experience that you're providing. And so you have to really understand that first and foremost. And you mitigate your risk by understanding where you fall in on that revenue range. You don't always come right in the middle, right? And you can't underwrite every deal in the middle. It's not, half of them you're not going to get, some of them you're going to be too high. And so you have to really understand that revenue range. And it's not difficult to figure that out. It's just unfamiliar for a lot of people. And so we go back to kind of really learning this asset class. The second piece of that puzzle is rules and regulations, right? Short-term rentals, this last year, this was kind of the year of really this becoming a mature asset class, and most municipalities saying, we like these or we don't like them. Just like any other real estate asset, there's certain zoning and licensing requirements for most any other mainstream asset. If you want to do an apartment complex, you can't put it anywhere. You have to have the right zoning and density rules for that. If I want to put a 7-Eleven, I can't put that on any corner. I have to have the correct zoning and licensing and permitting for that. Short-term rentals now have become that. And so we don't invest anywhere that does not have the blessing of, hey, you can go operate as a short-term rental here. It is zoned correctly. I can get the licensing and the permitting for that. That mitigates our risk from having anything change, and that's really likely to have already had those conversations in most of these municipalities. The last couple years, you go back 2 or 3 years, a lot of people were buying in the gray area, and they weren't buying in places they couldn't do it. They just didn't say yes or no. And then they run the risk of, okay, when they do address it, if it becomes a no, now all of a sudden they own a property and there's a no on there. So for us as investors, we only and always have bought in areas that are zoned and licensed where we can go get the zoning and licensing for a short-term rental.
That makes a ton of sense. I think that really helps people understand that there are areas that where it's approved, and changing the zoning is going to be a massive endeavor, right? To flip that.
Yeah.
So it's just,
and typically that zoning does not change on you, but people misuse the term that it changed on them. It really doesn't. It usually gets addressed, and it was never addressed. And so it doesn't usually ever go from a yes to a no. And if it does, you're typically going to be grandfathered in, right? Because you were following the rules, and you all of a sudden got grandfathered in if they make it a little bit harder, regulations change. What happened for a lot of people is they were operating in that gray area. So for us as investors, we mitigate our risk by, like, we've never bought in those gray areas unless we know that, hey, listen, I'm okay with this changing to a no, and I've got a plan B for it.
I love it. I think that there gives people a lot of peace of mind to move forward with this, right? Let's talk about now on the investor side, right? Let's say an agent, whether they've made money doing this model for other people, or they've just made great money doing business as as they've traditionally done it, and it's time to start investing in lifestyle assets. Talk to us through maybe what sort of money they should have set aside, right? Because I realize that with rental properties, you don't need the same amount because that rent will offset, right? The cost. Would love to hear kind of your thoughts, some of the numbers for that people ought to have in mind, whether it be expertise, whether it be numbers, to really be a serious player in this space, not just a dreamer, but actually ready to take some action. What does that look like? What would you?
Love it. And it's something that as agents, a lot of times we don't think about. We're always transactional, right? We're like, okay, I'm going to hustle and I'm just going to keep building. I'm going to keep building. I was there. I've done it. So I can speak to it because I know exactly that mindset. And in fact, a long time ago, I had a conversation with a guy at a real estate investment meeting, and it was when I was fixing and flipping houses, but the exact same conversation applies to agents. And he put his arm around me, and I was bragging that I was this big shot investor. And he said, Shawn, you're not an investor. You have a job fixing up houses and selling them. You get these chunks of money, and then you have to go do it again. Agents do the same thing, right? We go build our businesses, we get commission paid on that transaction, and we have to go do it again and again. As agents, we're not always really great at building a portfolio of passive income, right? And so what can we do to take that earned income and create passive income? And that's where I'd like most agents to start thinking about, is saying, okay, listen, you have the ability to go build a business that really doesn't have a ceiling on the amount of money you can earn. You have the ability to go earn pretty significant chunks of income actively. What are you going to do to build a passive portfolio so that you ultimately don't have to be selling houses every single day, right? And so as agents, we don't think about that until, usually we're burned out on the active side of it. And we're starting to think about it. Short-term rentals are a passive investment. And just like if you bought a long-term portfolio or apartment complexes, multifamily, whatever it is, choose your passive investment vehicle that fits for you, that checks those boxes, and then start to decide, okay, how am I going to make this happen? And in any endeavor, you need three things. You need time, money, knowledge, and you have to have some leverage in all three of those. And so short-term rentals, one of the drawbacks is they take a little bit longer. And so if it's a passive investment vehicle, I don't want to manage my own portfolio. I don't manage any of my own homes. I've been doing this for a long time. I know how to manage short-term rentals. We don't manage any of our own homes because I want it to be a passive income vehicle, but I have to spend 3 to 5 hours a week on my portfolio in marketing that portfolio. So you have to decide, okay, one, do I have the time to do that? Do I have 3 to 5 hours a week to dedicate? Money is, if we're going to buy properties, we have to have some money, right? So the three things that we need on the money side, we need down payments, which is usually going to be between 10 and 20%, depending on the loan product that you choose. And 10% down, second home loans are a really good source for most people to use and tap into. You have to have money to furnish and set up a property. I always tell people budget around 10% of that acquisition. So if you're going to spend $300,000 on a property, budget about $30,000 if it's completely unfurnished and you have to furnish it and set it up. One of the nice things about a lot of short-term rentals is they're already sold furnished. And so maybe you don't have to have that entire 10% saved up for that. But then the third thing that a lot of people forget about is there's a launch process for this in this asset class. You don't just immediately go hit your stride and get all the income that you're going to start generating. Usually, I always tell people, give yourself 6 to 9 months of a runway where you're going to be paying for some of those property expenses, especially the first 2 or 3 months. You're going to make money in that 6 to 9 month period, but it's going to be a little bit of a roller coaster. And so to budget, you say, okay, I need my down payment, I need to be able to furnish it, and I need to be able to get through my launch phase before it really turns into this amazing passive income vehicle for me, because I want people to walk into this game with their eyes wide open, because if you can get through that, and you do, it's a really, really fun asset class to own. And then that third thing you need to leverage is knowledge. Do you know how to do it? Who are you going to leverage? Their knowledge, experience. That's what most of us do, is we find somebody to help us leverage, somebody else's experience and knowledge so we can compress that learning curve. And so, but those are the things that I always tell people to think about as they get into short-term rentals, but also really anything new that you're going to be diving into.
Such great advice. And I think one of the things I remember listening on one of your podcast episodes was the knowledge around how to market these properties, right? Of making it an experience.
Yeah.
To where, for example, I think you were talking about one up in Island Park, which I was born in Idaho Falls, Idaho. So I know kind of where that area.
Yeah.
And I remember you talking about how it's the place itself. It's not just a place for people to sleep, but as part of the property, you create a whole experience around it, like what to do and kind of different. In fact, I'll let you speak to it, because I was impressed by kind of how you position this property as being much more than just a place to sleep, but really kind of the hub of an entire experience.
Yeah. And so I always tell people, and this is a huge mistake that a lot of people are making, especially right now. You have to remember the last couple years that for short-term rentals, really since COVID really accelerated the maturity of this asset class. But it was having a short-term rental was kind of like having toilet paper during COVID. Anybody who had one was making pretty good money. And so we just had, because demand far exceeded supply. That's not the case. It's becoming a more regular, mature type of a market where supply's caught up with demand. And so in this game, you have to back yourself off and say, okay, what am I really selling? A mistake that most people make is they think they're selling a house. We're not selling a house. We're not selling real estate. And those realtors out there that are listening to this, you're used to selling real estate. In short-term rental game, I'm selling an experience. What people come for me is an experience. And so I have to say, okay, how am I going to articulate and set up a great experience, and then be able to articulate that to my audience through my marketing, so that they don't think they're just selling a house. That property you're referring to up in Island Park was on Henry's Lake, which was a main lake up there. And we were cabin on that lake. I had neighbors on the lake, both sides of me. Both of my neighbors were renting out short-term, beautiful $1 million cabins, all of them, except for we were getting double the nightly rate that anybody else was getting, because they were selling this beautiful $1 million cabin on the lake. We were selling an amazing fly fishing experience, right? And so this property was set up targeting fly fishermen because we're on the lake. We've got drift boats. We've got 5 blue ribbon trout streams within 15 minutes of the property. You got the Madison, the Yellowstone, the Henry's Fork, all these great fly fishing spots. And they would come in. We had wader drying stations up, so they didn't have to put wet waders on day 2. The only day normally fly fishermen are used to dry waders on the first day of the trip, and that's it. So we had all these different things. When they checked into my house, they had a custom tied fly box full of my favorite flies. And I would say, hey, listen, these are my favorite flies. By the way, here's a map. And I would highlight on the map exactly where they should go fish around this bend on this tree. You're going to find a hole here. So I catered to what they were coming to do. I didn't sell my cabin. I sold, hey, you're coming here to fly fish. I'm going to make this experience of fly fishing amazing for you. And so, and that's one example of sell the experience, not the property.
Man, it's so obvious, right? But it's so different.
Yeah, right. It's different. Yeah.
But
it's not rocket science. It does seem obvious, but sometimes we forget. Sometimes things seem so obvious and so simple that we're like, that's not going to make a big difference. You're not going to get double the nightly rate your neighbor is by doing that. And I can tell you from doing it, as long as we've done it, that is exactly how you get double the nightly rate that anybody else gets.
Well, I mean, you think about, again, and for all real estate agents that are listening to this, there's a lesson ingrained in here, which is when we just stay within the silo of our job description, of what people expect from us from the time that we sign the contract to the time that we, walk out of closing and hand them the keys. Like if that's all we do, we're very easy to replace and it becomes a price game at that point. But if we can say, what are the other concerns that people are having before this, after this, ultimately, why are they doing this? You start asking deeper questions and you start to find different and deeper answers. And all of a sudden you set yourself apart because they can go to you and have the entire experience taken care of, as opposed to going next door and getting only a place to sleep taken care of.
And absolutely. And people will pay you more as an agent, right? Agents are always like, how do I, this agent's discounting their commission here. I have to compete with this here. You don't have to, right? If you can give your prospect or your customer any justification to pay you more, they will gladly pay you more. And a lot of times that justification is like on an agent side. I've never paid a discount commission. When I listed it, I've never paid a discount commission when I've sold a property. I pay a full commission every single time. And I'm happy to do so because the agents that we work with, they also, I'm going to pay them more because they understand what I want. They understand the asset that I'm going into. They understand exactly how to do the things that we're trying to do and reach the goals that we're trying to reach. And I don't reach my goals by going and finding the cheapest agent. I find the one that can provide me with the best service. And agents even, I think, and this is not just agents, this is in any business. I just told you like a very simple thing to get more money on the short-term rental side, but a simple way to provide more value to your client base as an agent is just provide them something that somebody else is not giving them. Understand the numbers, right? And don't just show me everything on the MLS. Say, hey, Shawn, I think that this one looks good because of this, and I think this fits right your criteria. That simple little thing will set you apart, head and shoulders above anybody else in the market.
Yeah, I love it. Right, price only becomes the issue in the absence of value, right? And
absolutely,
and value has to be answered of what are the other concerns that my client is having at this time, whether it be a fly fishing expedition client or whether it be an investor client looking to buy one of these properties. Absolutely. What else are they concerned with at this time? How could I solve that? All of a sudden, they can't compete. Like your competition can't compete against you because you're offering two totally different things.
Yeah,
and that's how margins increase. Shawn, such a fun conversation. I'm really looking forward to continuing to learn from you. For those that have not yet seen inside the chat, or those that are listening on the podcast, Vodyssey.com. Go there. You'll find a number of free resources. Be sure and plug into Shawn's podcast. Tell us the name of your podcast, Shawn, so everybody can hear it.
Yeah, it's called Vacation Rental Revolution. So we go on weekly and we talk about all things short-term rentals.
It's awesome. I've been on. It's a great show. I've got one last question for you here, Shawn. This is a question I ask everybody who crosses the stage, which is this. You are a big thinker, right? You've done some incredible things helping other people to think a lot bigger. What is it that Shawn Moore does to continue to be a big thinker, to continue to expand your possibilities, to continue to grow? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, for us, the easiest way for me personally is we surround ourselves with other big thinkers, right? We love like getting on these kind of conversations, having conversations with other people, surrounding ourselves with other people who think bigger than us. And then like when I love talking to somebody that's a step or two ahead of me, and surrounding ourselves with people that have, a couple steps ahead of us, so we can learn from them and really realize that, hey, there's really no limit to anything that any of us can do. And the more we surround ourselves with people that think bigger than us and that are doing bigger things, the faster that we're going to get there as well, because we believe it's possible. Like, right, we're all kind of built from the same DNA and the same, our brains pretty much work the same way. And if you can surround yourself with big thinkers, you're going to believe that's possible. And then all of a sudden, before you know it, it is the reality.
Yeah, it's always impossible until you see somebody else who did it, and then you're like, wait a minute, how did they do it? Instead of thinking like that's not possible, you start to say, well, how did they do it? It just starts to open up a question. I love it, Shawn. Such a great answer, and such a good plug for our mission here, which is really to help people to think bigger, to expand their possibilities, able to live, give, and serve abundantly. So fun to have a guy like you who is truly a big thinker here on the show. Appreciate you very much. For anybody that's listening to this, is wanting to go deeper on this topic and see how else we help you to think bigger, be sure and join us inside of our Facebook group. It's called Think Bigger Real Estate on Facebook. We'd love to have you in there and connect you to some of the resources we have to help you to grow. And be sure to head over to Vodyssey.com and get going on creating the niche around selling to investors around short-term rentals and building your own portfolio. We've had the man, the myth, the legend right here on this topic today. Shawn, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it very much.
Absolutely, Justin. Thanks for having me.
You bet. And my final request of everybody listening here today are these 3 simple words, and they are go, think bigger. Thanks, friends. Talk to you soon. Be honest, hearing good ideas is not enough. You have to apply them in order to get the results desired. If you found value in today's episode, then you're really going to love the community of big thinkers and high achievers that we are building in order to help you to apply the principles taught today. If you're not yet a member of Think Bigger Real Estate on Facebook, go sign up now.